So, not too long ago, I published my ranking of all significant Walking Dead villains. And just like clockwork, the Shane Glazers came out to argue that he really wasn't a villain and that he's actually an anti-hero or shapeshifter or whatever term they want to use. Be that as it may, the hardcore Shane fans gave me an idea. Why don't I just settle this silly debate once and for all? Now, in order to really answer this question, I'm going to first lay out the case for Shane being an anti-hero, and then I'll systematically deconstruct the claim. That way we can finally put an end to this dumb debate. With that being said, what seems to be the most common line of reasoning that gets people to believe that Shane isn't a villain is one which is born from the mouth of Jon Bernthal himself. The idea that Shane wanted Rick to man up, so that he could be the father that Judith needed, and so that he could keep Lori and Carl safe, while also simultaneously yearning for Rick to end his own suffering. This fan theory is, at first glance, a decent explanation for why Shane doesn't just cap Rick on the spot, but rather goes on to have a needless diatribe where he then refuses to kill an unarmed Rick. Here's a clip of Bernthal explaining his alternate ending for the final confrontation between Rick and Shane. And again, keep in mind, this is an alternate ending that Jon admits the writers did not adapt.
You know, Andy Lincoln and I had a very different kind of idea for how that scene was going to play out. And I was really disappointed that they didn't go that way. And then Rick says, what are you going to do? You going to kill me? You going to kill me right here? And then Rick was going to throw his gun away. And then I kept pushing him with my gun like I was going to kill him. And I basically forced him to stab me. And then when I reanimated as a zombie, I wanted Rick to pick up my gun and try to shoot me as a zombie, but he would just go click, 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 and the gun was going to be empty. And then Carl would come out and blast old Shane, because what I thought was that Shane brought Rick out into the woods to make Rick be the kind of man enough to raise Shane's baby. We argued a lot, and Andy and I really loved this idea that I came up with, and they decided not to go that way. But I think there was really there's still very much a flavor of that in the way that we played it, and it was very much in my head that part of what I was trying to do is take my own life in that scene. So yeah, this got heavy.
Now, I don't really like Jon's alternate ending because the motivation behind Shane's actions in such a scene would be contradictory to the motives established prior to his death in the story. Be that as it may, this isn't the ending we got, as literally confirmed by Bernthal in the clip I just played for you. But he did say that there were some elements of that interpretation in the way he and Andrew Lincoln acted out that particular scene. And this may give the Shane Glazers some leeway to make a seemingly coherent argument. Another piece of evidence one could potentially use to bolster the anti-hero claim is that Robert Kirkman himself stated that Shane wasn't a, quote, dastardly villain. But when we look at this quote in its entirety and proper context, we see that Kirkman is merely pointing out that Shane isn't your typical bad guy. He's a truly tragic character who we should feel sorry for. This is a quote I've brought up before in defense of Shane when his haters pretend that he was always a terrible person to begin with. But fact of the matter is, this statement by Kirkman does not confirm that Shane isn't a villain. It merely confirms that he is indeed a tragic villain with a negative change arc, as in the story of Shane Walsh is one of a man falling from grace. Again, this is something I've covered in the past in great detail, so forgive me for not elaborating further. Just go ahead and watch my primary video on Shane's character if you want to hear more. That being said, this is literally the extent of the anti-hero argument. Now, of course, there's other smaller details, like Shane actually caring about others and not just Lori and Carl, which I actually think is quite evidently true, but is ultimately irrelevant to the discussion at hand. And the reason I say that is because for the anti-hero claim to really land, we have to seriously doubt Shane's intentions during his climactic showdown with Officer Friendly. Just about everything beforehand doesn't really matter if he actually intended to kill Rick. So, setting that aside, let's now deconstruct how this line of reasoning just doesn't work. And the best place to start off would be with the definitions we have for the term villain. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, a villain is a character who opposes the hero, or who is either a deliberate scoundrel or criminal. It can also be anyone being blamed for a particular evil or difficulty. And according to Google, which gets their definitions from Oxford Languages, a villain is a character whose evil actions or motives are important to the plot. So it would be safe to suggest that a villain is a character who opposes the protagonist, and is typically responsible for creating conflict in a story. They often embody evil, selfishness, and morally corrupt traits, but they can also be complex individuals with understandable motives or tragic backstories. Antiheroes, on the other hand, are defined by Google as being central characters in a story, movie, or drama who lack conventional heroic attributes. The Merriam-Webster dictionary mirrors this definition by defining antihero as a protagonist or notable figure who is conspicuously lacking in heroic qualities. As such, we can say that antiheroes lack traditional heroic values such as courage, idealism, and moral integrity. They are also often flawed, cynical, and may even act in ways that are morally dubious. But these characters are, ultimately, heroes at the end of the day. Hence, they do what they do for what the story and society perceives to be the greater good. And to be frank, attempting to kill your best friend because you want to fuck his wife and have his son call you daddy is not what any hero would do, regardless of whether or not they are a traditional hero or an anti-hero. And yes, Judith is his kid, but she's also Laurie's kid. And Laurie wants Judith to be Rick's daughter. You know, the man she's fucking married to. Regardless of that fact, what Shane desired to accomplish was fundamentally selfish as opposed to being truly heroic. But the anti-hero claim asserts that Shane never truly intended to kill Rick. And that specific claim is vital to the success of the anti-hero argument, for without it, the position collapses entirely. Now, unfortunately for the Shane fangirl club, the evidence simply does not support such a conclusion. For starters, Shane aimed his shotgun at Rick in the Season 1 episode Wildfire, which was the first real crack in his mental state which foreshadowed his inevitable slide into villainy. Throughout Seasons 1 and 2, Shane also constantly opposed Rick, and even tried to convince Laurie to leave her husband, especially post-Otis. Then, during the Season 2 episode 18 Miles Out, Shane literally tried to kill Rick with a wrench. This motherfucker literally put all of his soul into that throw, all with the intent of decapitating and deatomizing Rick. And then, in the episode Better Angels, Shane literally admits he tried to kill Rick.
Thought we worked this all out. Try to kill each other, man. Try to kill each other, man. Try to kill each other, man.
Now, to be fair, it's very possible that Shane could have been lying to Rick in that scene. But by applying Occam's razor, we would see just how silly the anti-hero claim is in the presence of this evidence. Simply ask yourself, which theory best explains Shane's intentions with the least amount of assumptions? He really wanted to kill Rick, or Shane was just trying to make Rick a better man while also trying to kill himself? Which, by the way, is a contradictory motive. He wants Rick to be better because he wants Laurie, Carl, and Judith to be safe, but he then believes he shouldn't be present to ensure that his baby, Laurie, and Carl are safe? Like, bro, if you care that much, at least be around to be a failsafe. Also, making Rick a better man doesn't really require that he drag Rick out into the middle of Butt-Fuckistan with a loaded gun just to basically pull the world's worst prank. One which involved him killing Randall, breaking his own nose, and then lying to the entire group. See the issue here? The villainous Shane argument works with the evidence on screen. The anti-hero claim literally relies on extra guesswork that cannot be expressly falsified or verified, while also maintaining weak and conflicting evidentiary support. Simply put, the anti-hero explanation is fucking retarded. It just doesn't work when we actually deconstruct it properly. But if you find yourself unable to accept this inculpatory evidence, let's now look to John Bernthal's actual interpretation of the scene we actually got. According to Bernthal, he believes someone was going to die that night, no matter what, and that Shane clearly intended to kill Rick. Okay, that right there, ladies and gents, is what we call a smoking gun. As in, you losers just got handed a fat fucking L. And you know what? I'm truly sorry I had to do it to you. But this conclusion is pretty obvious to those of us who don't have a fictional character's dick in our asses. Shane was literally a villain in the comic, and he was even originally intended to be the primary villain of the story. That is before Kirkman changed his mind and made Shane a small-time villain. If Shane wasn't a villain in AMC's TV adaptation of the story, Shane would be the first main villain of The Walking Dead to be categorically different than his comic book counterpart. Now ask yourself, how likely is that really? The answer is that it ain't likely at all.
But Captain Gold, you can't explain why Shane didn't kill Rick when he had the chance. It's clearly because Shane didn't want to kill Rick. Shane isn't stupid. He knew people wouldn't believe his lie.
Here's a simple explanation for you troglodytes. Rick knew Shane on an intimate level. He knew Shane would struggle to kill his best friend, and he knew Shane needed to prove that he deserved Lori and Carl. And given his particular disposition during the scene, being that of a disadvantageous position, Rick plays the only cards he can play, being a psychological gambit aimed at disarming Shane and creating a temporary opening for him to put down his insane friend. Now, unfortunately for Shane, Rick was absolutely right. He was too weak and too prideful to simply end Rick on the spot. He had to get that villain monologue out, and he also had to overcome his inability to follow through with his intentions, while also having to prove to Rick that he was the better man. Furthermore, he had no idea that Rick had a knife, and he probably thought he'd be safe allowing Rick to hand over his gun. Had Rick acted any different, with any form of aggression, Shane likely would have put him down. As literally confirmed by Bernthal, someone was gonna die that night.
But Gold, the fact that Shane even hesitated and fell for Rick's talk no jutsu means he really wasn't a villain.
I'd hate to break it to y'all, but it isn't all that uncommon for villains to experience momentary periods of hesitation, especially from those who truly believe they're the heroes of their story. Fact of the matter is, Shane kept his gun on Rick the entire time. Even with his self-doubt being present, he was clearly still preparing himself to use deadly force. If this was some mystical misunderstanding, that gun would have dropped to a more relaxed position. Also note the placement of his hand on Rick's neck. He was trying to resist being stabbed to death. That definitely puts into doubt the claim that he actually wanted to die. Oh, and the whole idea that Shane isn't stupid and that he knew he would get caught? Guys, this is the man who wanted to go to Fort fucking Benning. This is the guy who never figured out the Walker Guts technique, and he's also the same exact guy who survived for far longer than Rick did, while Rick was in a coma, and he couldn't figure out the importance of using blades to conserve ammunition and to maintain stealth when operating against the walkers. Oh, and lastly, this is the guy who was fine with just holding up at that rinky-dink camp that got overrun by the undead. I mean, sure, yeah, he had sharp instincts about the world, but he was far from being a tactical genius. So I think it's actually almost near certain that he felt he could actually get away with killing Rick.
Well, Shane was really just out there trying to get rid of Rick because he viewed him to be a threat to the group's survival. It's not just about Lori, Carl, and Judith.
Yet he clearly explains this is all about him wanting Lori and Carl, going as far as to tell Rick that he's a better man and father and that his family will eventually get over him again. There was no talk of the group's best interests. It was all very fucking personal. Furthermore, killing someone like Rick, instead of just convincing the group to not follow him by discrediting him, is a fantastically stupid line of reasoning.
Okay, well, you know what? Shane wasn't really a villain until the end of Season 2, so yeah, take that. Checkmate, Captain Gold. I'm the one who has better commentary, and you don't know shit.
Yeah, dipshit, that's how negative change arcs tend to play out. That being said, he clearly became a true villain the moment he attempted to kill Rick in 18 Miles Out. Truth be told, Shane Glazers suffer from media illiteracy. A negative change arc from the protagonist's literal shadow and foil is basically the exact setup you'd expect from a tragic, sympathetic villain, and not from some anti-hero. Wanting to kill your best friend so that you can fuck his wife and have his kid call you daddy is not what an anti-hero would do, because an anti-hero breaks the rules or traditionally held values of heroes in order to do what is perceived as being righteous. What Shane does, and intended on doing, is wrong on every level, and it was all for his selfish need to be with Lori and Carl, the very purpose he cannot live without. So yes, ladies and gents, Shane is indeed a fucking villain, and a damn good one at that. Anyways, if you like this sort of content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell as well if you'd like to be notified when I publish a new video. And always remember that you may opine anytime if you feel so inclined, down in the comment section. I'm Captain Gold and I hope to see you in my next Gold Standard video.